Hi and welcome back! As I'm starting to near the end of the Letterpress project, I've been trying to fix some problems I've inadvertently introduced in previous episodes. Since the last Letterpress episode, I've completely revamped the Platen mechanism. When I originally made the Platen, I made these custom standoff pieces. Long story short, these ended up being a bad idea. Between the badly formed hex heads and the crooked threads, I really needed something better. So I replaced them with some modified 5/8 inch bolts, and with that improvement I was able to get the Platen in bed much more coplanar. Look how much my impression quality improved just from this one adjustment. In this episode, I'm going to make the ink disc mechanism. Each printing cycle, the ink rollers will roll up onto this plate and pick up a thin layer of ink. Then, the rollers will deposit their ink onto whatever's in the chase, before making their way back up to the ink disc for the next impression. And, to ensure that the ink is evenly distributed across the roller, the disc rotates slightly between each impression. This has the effect of cycling the ink around the disc, if that makes sense. This rotating mechanism is going to be a pretty fun one to make, and we'll get to that in a second. First though, I need to make the frame pieces to mount this mechanism on top of. This is actually going to be pretty straightforward. I'm going to make two pieces that are separated by some linkages. Each frame piece will be a small rectangle made from 1/2 inch steel. Along each side, I'll drill some holes for the linkage pieces to attach. Each of the linkage pieces will consist of a short length of 1 inch steel bar. On one end, I'll form a hole. I'll form a slot along the remaining length. This will give me some adjustability in the mechanism. Since I was using a relatively small end mill, I went slow and took many passes to get through all the pieces. Here's all of them out of the mill. Let's put the assembly together. The slots give the mechanism a ton of adjustability. I can dial in the exact angle and position of the ink disc in relation to the rest of the press pretty trivially. Okay, so next up, I get to make this mechanism. Somehow, I need to periodically advance the ink disc a partial turn every impression. I can probably tie into the roller frame motion, somehow, but what sort of mechanism would work? Here's what I came up with. I've taken inspiration from a clock escapement mechanism. You know, one of these things. Every time the roller frame descends, it will pull on a chain. That chain will attach to a lever, which will act on this barb-shaped piece. This will interact with the main element, a ratchet. The pawl on the other side ensures the ratchet can only spin in one direction. With some tuning, I think this could work out pretty well. So let's start making it. I'm going to begin with the ratchet, as it's probably the most complex part. I'm going to round off the outside of the ratchet using this mandrel I made when cutting the drive gears. That was a fun process. Now, I'll mark out the positions of each ratchet tooth. Each forms a right angle with the tooth before it. Okay, and that's roughly the right shape. I've already marked out the pawl and the barb off camera. Each has a hole in the end. I'll cut out each of their profiles on the bandsaw. Let's test out the pieces and make sure everything works as expected. Now, I need to mount all the stuff to the frame. Luckily, I've planned it all out in CAD, so it's just a matter of transferring a bunch of measurements. For the most part, I just need to drill a bunch of holes. I do need to form a recessed cavity for a bearing. Let's get everything installed and see how it moves. First impressions look good. But wait. I hadn't realized that the mechanism can bind up like this. Okay, new plan. Let me switch around the orientation of this pawl piece. Maybe it'll work better if the flat side engages with the ratchet instead. Nice, I got lucky there. That's a much better action. Next, I need to shaft the transfer motion from the ratchet to the ink disc. One end will be 5/8 inch in diameter. This is what will interface with the ratchet. The other end will be approximately 1 inch in diameter, and will interface with the ink disc itself. On the 5/8 inch end, I'll cut some threads. I'll use these to hold the shaft in place. Let's see how it fits. The last part of the mechanism I need to make is the arm, i.e. this piece of metal. This is what will actuate the barb piece back and forth. This is pretty straightforward. I just need to drill 2 holes in some 1/2 inch steel bar. Now I can install the whole assembly into the press. Finally, I need to make the actual disc part of the ink disc mechanism. Luckily, I was able to find a suitable piece of pre-cut metal online. But somehow, I'm going to have to install this disc onto the shaft in the ratchet mechanism. To do this, I'm going to make a bushing piece to attach to the disc. Set screws around the outside will interface with the shaft. This bushing starts off as this piece of 4-inch steel round. This is a pretty large piece, but its size is going to be important later on. I'll chuck this piece into the lathe. Over the course of a few passes, I'll bore a 1-inch hole down the center of the material. After boring the large hole, I'll drill some smaller holes around the perimeter for the set screws. I'll tap the holes to fit the set screws. And now I can put in all the set screws. There are 8 in total, arranged in pairs around the perimeter. Now to attach this piece to the disc. This was a problem I spent a lot of time thinking about. The trouble is, I don't want to put any holes into the disc piece. There's going to be ink on there after all. And I don't have a welder or other mechanism to fuse the 2 pieces of metal together into one. The best I could come up with was some epoxy. And this is why having a large piece is important. A larger piece means more glue surface area. Once I've got the epoxy mixed up, I use the center point to roughly align the bushing piece onto the center. And a bit of sanding will hopefully make the epoxy stick better. Now I can apply the epoxy and hope for the best. Okay, so after a few hours, it's looking like it's set and holding. Let's get it installed onto the press. Very nice. Here's the final ink disc mechanism, all put together. Overall, I'm relatively pleased with how this came out. The ratchet mechanism could use a little bit more adjustment. It doesn't always work as reliably as I would like, but I'll do that off camera. What do you think of the ink disc mechanism? Let me know in the comments below. And thanks for watching. See you later.